The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
A manhunt underway in Antioch, Tennessee, after a gunman kills 4 people and injures 4 others at a Waffle House restaurant. Here's what we know right now. Police are asking for the public's help in finding 29-year-old Travis Ranking. Authorities say the gunman arrived in a truck and came out wielding an assault-type rifle. Police say a man believed to be Travis Ranking was last seen wearing black pants and no shirt.
4 people are dead in Tennessee, and the suspect, 29-year-old Travis Ranking of Norton, Illinois, is still at large. During the killing, during the shooting, he used, of course, an AR-15. That is the weapon of choice of mass shooters. Ironically, the police are saying that this white man, who later we found was a part of a white nationalist organization, Sovereign Citizens, police are saying they have no idea why he possibly would go into a Waffle House full of people of color and kill so many people. No clue whatsoever. Never mind the fact that he was a part of a white nationalist organization, or at least a self-declared member of Sovereign Citizens. He also had some interest in Donald Trump. He previously was in a restricted area, arrested for being in a restricted area because he, according to the USA Today, needed to have a conversation with the president. Take a listen in.
We have learned that Ryan King was arrested by the United States Secret Service for being in a restricted area near the White House in July of 2017. He was subsequently released. Ryan King was later interviewed by Tazewell County, Illinois authorities and the FBI. His Illinois firearms authorization was revoked, to our understanding, at the request of the FBI, and 4 weapons were seized by Tazewell County authorities. Among the weapons seized by those authorities was the AR-15 rifle used at the Waffle House today. The police department has received information that the guns were returned by Tazewell County authorities to Ryan King's father, who has now acknowledged giving them back to his son. As I said a moment ago, presently 2 of the 4 guns that were given back to his son are unaccounted for. We have the AR-15 rifle recovered from the Waffle House this morning. There was also another rifle recovered by the SWAT team at his apartment early this afternoon. Travis Ryan King's whereabouts are presently unknown. Searches are on by law enforcement throughout the area, including our federal partners.
So this guy is still at large. I mean, this guy is extremely dangerous. He has already killed. And if he had access to weapons, it's quite likely he would kill again. But there doesn't seem to be that much attention on this story. Now, what I am not saying that the media is not covering it, because the media is. But there's an intensity, a national intensity that occurs around events like this if there is a certain level of fear associated with that event, or concern, or dismay, or just horror. There's a level of intensity, and it drives the news cycle. So the media is covering this, and we'll play a clip of the media interviewing James Shaw Jr., the hero of the day. They are covering this. But what's trending right now on Twitter is Kate Middleton's baby. I think Princess Catherine is the name. You know, the president of the United States has said nothing about it. So there is a level of disinterest that is associated with this story that, for a person who is still on the loose, quite frankly, everyone in the area and everyone in the area should be definitely concerned. But had this been a different scenario, the eyes of the entire nation would be fixated on this story. If this person, if the 29-year-old Ryan King, if he was a Muslim, the president of the United States would have declared martial law. Now, that's hyperbolic, but the president of the United States surely would have made statements, quite possibly a press conference, if this guy was still at large. Like, the urgency is the fact that this man is still at large. This is still an ongoing news story. Can you imagine if this person had been black, killing a room full of white people? Can you imagine if this person had been an immigrant who killed a room? If it had been a Mexican or just a brown person of some ambiguous descent where we can't really identify where they're from, everyone would be sounding the alarms. This would be a Fox News alert every 10 minutes with the flashing lights at the bottom of the screen. So I'm not saying that the media isn't covering it, because they are discussing it, but they're not discussing it with the urgency that you would see had this been a person of color or a person of Middle Eastern descent or someone who was of the Muslim faith. There would be an urgency that would elicit a response immediately by the president of the United States. And yet we have not a single tweet, not even a tweet, no statement, no comment, not even a tweet. And this is where we are. The story is tragic. The people who were killed, 4 people who were killed, lives cut short by this individual. And it would have been so many more people killed had it not been for the actions of a hero who did not have a gun, but took matters into his own hands in order to save his life and the lives of so many other people. Take a listen in to James Shaw Jr., who used his bare hands to wrestle a gun, an assault rifle, away from this terrorist.
So when I ran through the swivel door acted kind of like another hit, another layer, and it pushed the gun down. So the barrel of the gun actually bumped down, and it was aimed towards the ground. And once it was aimed towards the ground, I held the gun down, I think with my left hand, and I think I was maybe punching or hitting or whatever I was doing with my right hand. And then once he released it, he had it at one point in time, he had it in one hand, and then when he had it in one hand, I just took it from him with both my hands, and then I took it and I threw it over the countertop, and then I was still trying to get out, so I took him and myself out of the Waffle House because I knew my best chance of surviving was outside.
Can you imagine having to make that type of decision? He said in another interview, he said that he had to make a choice. He knew that the guy was going to get him anyway. And so he decided to just take it into his own hands and take the risk because he was going to get killed either way it went. We're putting American citizens, forget about American citizenry, it's meaningless. We're putting human lives. We're making other people have to make these types of decisions. And it is a frequent occurrence that they're having to make these life or death decisions with their bare hands against people who are armed to the teeth. Contrary to the NRA's wet dreams, not every American is going to buy, purchase, and carry a firearm. And so where they have these fantasies and role-playing fantasies of being the good guy with a gun, in reality, we're leaving unarmed citizens at the mercy of racist terrorists. How often are we going to go through this scenario? How often are we going to play? This story is so tragic, but it actually illuminates so many intersections of problems in the United States. It illuminates the fact that we will not consider someone like this a terrorist, a domestic terrorist, even though they have an affiliation and association with a hate group. They have an association with a group that does not believe in the authority of the United States of America. I mean, how more politically oriented violence, how much more could this have been politically oriented violence? That's what I wanted to say. And then he's from the shooter's from Missouri, so or Illinois rather, and he drove down to Tennessee and killed a room full of people of color, predominantly black. And so even if you don't consider this to be a terrorist action, it's most certainly a hate crime. But the police are still saying that they have no idea. They think it was random. I mean, look at all the intersections that this is falling on. So it's not only a question of how the media and how police interpret white violence in the United States. It's also a question of how we are leaving citizens and human beings exposed to a certain level of violence that we don't have in other countries, having to have hand-to-hand combat, or rather hand-to-gun combat, with people with assault rifles. And yet the level of concern, despite the fact that this killer is still on the loose, is about the level of a breaking news cycle. You know, it's the A segment. It is it is a leading news story, but it is not an issue where everyone, all hands are on deck, where the eyes of the entire country are locked into their televisions to find this terrorist who is on the loose. But I guarantee you, had this been a person of color, or God forbid, a self-identified Muslim, or even someone with a Middle Eastern sounding name, the entire country would almost be on lockdown, and the president of the United States would have made a statement acknowledging the people who were killed and politicizing this to demand action on immigration or his Muslim ban. But listen to James Shaw Jr. as he describes how he woke up this morning, how he felt when he woke up this morning. And this is the reality in the United States that so many people have to wake up to day after day, because we do nothing about gun violence in this country. We do nothing about the ease with which they can get an AR-15. We do nothing about domestic terrorism, where it is so much more likely that you will be harmed or killed by a white man, a white right-wing terrorist, than you ever would someone of Middle Eastern descent. Take a listen to James Shaw Jr.
This morning, I actually got up thinking about the people that had passed, the 4 people that had passed, and I was thinking about the other victims that were in Waffle House, and I'm hoping that they are just as, people are just as concerned about them as they are about me.
The surprise announcement from North Korea saying it's suspending its missile tests and closing its nuclear test site.
The move coming ahead of the planned face-to-face meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un.
Now the outstanding question, can North Korea be trusted? No doubt this major move by Kim Jong-un is setting the tone for what is sure to be high-stakes negotiation.
There is actually hope for peace on the Korean Peninsula. And it is an amazing time to observe what was quickly devolving into a nuclear catastrophe, or at least the potential of a nuclear catastrophe, particularly because of the rantings of the madman in the White House, has turned into a situation in which we could potentially see peace. And that is something to be celebrated. No matter who is in the White House, no matter the situation, if there is the opportunity for peace, it is something to be celebrated, hands down, no questions asked. However, if you study peace, or if you even pay attention, then you would pay attention to the true factors that led to this. What am I getting at? I have a link in the description of a Facebook post by a young guy. Never really have any confrontations with the fella, Nico House. And I want to read it for you because it is the sentiment of several people who identify as leftists, first of all. And, well, I've learned my lesson early on that you can't ignore bad ideas and think that they will just go away. You can't be silent when you see something that is so wrong being promulgated on your side of the equation. You actually have to open up your mouth and speak. So I'm going to read the post, and I think reading the post is a great segue into understanding what or why we must understand what actually happened or is happening on the Korean Peninsula. So Nico wrote, quote, "I can't believe I'm about to say this, but Trump helped to facilitate the end of a 63-year ongoing standoff between North and South Korea. He actually deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. And there isn't a but. He absolutely deserves it. This is something no other president has managed to do in the history of the Kim Jong family ruling DRNK." And I'm sure he meant there the DPRK, but that's fine. Now, the reason I'm bringing it up on my show is just a Facebook post, right? Well, it's a Facebook post from someone who has a burgeoning voice on the left, considers himself to be a leftist, and it has quite a few. It has some shares. I mean, 206 people liked it, 27 shares, and some of the names in the list of people who liked it also have platforms. So I learned a long time ago, long time ago being last year, is that you just can't sit back and leave things unchallenged, particularly when it comes to the critical space of identifying and sorting out the standpoint and viewpoints of the left. It is too important. Thankfully, you have people who know better. Benjamin Norton did an interview with Dr. Simone Chun of Harvard University's Korea Institute, and they succinctly outlined the true causes of what led, to this potential peace. Take a listen in.
This is a truly amazing development, and I think that obviously Donald Trump said that he's absolutely getting credit, which is true. And also, I think that another most important point we have to remember is that President Moon Jae-in, who was elected after the very powerful democratic movement called the Candlelight Movement, he has taken a very strong initiative and diplomacy, and also with as you recall, the very successful Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. And of course, importantly, North Korea's Kim Jong-un's leadership, unlike the way that Western media portrays a crazy or madman image, Kim Jong-un has been quite, especially since this beginning of this year, has been quite methodical and deliberate, and has been very, very proactive in making the commitment toward peace. So I think that if all goes well, this is probably the year that many of us will remember for the rest of life. It is truly the moment of history making.
Again, that was Dr. Simone Chun of the Harvard Korea Institute being interviewed by Ben Norton. I'm going to play a little bit more, and you can hear Ben's commentary. But before we go further, let's outline what really led to this. Number one, it was the movement, the Candlelight Movement, where hundreds of thousands of people fill the streets every single day demanding change in South Korea. And then subsequently, the election of the liberal President Moon Jae-in. And then, as Simone Chun outlined, it was also the actions of the North Korean president, Kim Jong-un, who we all see as a madman. Quite frankly, I've labeled him as such, is as mad as Donald Trump. And she outlines the case of him making methodical steps towards this moment. Now, we can unpack those methodical steps as something that has been modeled before with nations that are using nuclear proliferation to wedge themselves into the international community, as not just historically, but also in the future. Other nations who may be on the edge and may try to use leverage nuclear proliferation as a means of getting assimilated into the international community or forcing their way to the table. We could discuss that. But all of those are factors that actually led to this peace. Donald Trump was not a factor except for a destabilizing force. And for you to credit, but you know what? Hang on. Before I go any further, Let's listen to Ben Norton's interview. This is a part of the Real News Network. I have a link in the description. They are an independent media company, and I'm using their media, but I want you to click on the link and go support their site because this was a great interview, and I had to share it with you. Take a listen in.
So I'm curious, you did say that Trump has been claiming credit, and maybe he does deserve some credit, but I think you raise a more important point. I'm skeptical of the idea that Trump actually bears responsibility. What a lot of people in the U.S. media are ignoring is that, as you mentioned, there was a massive grassroots movement in South Korea, not just a peace movement, but there was a movement that brought in a more liberal government under President Moon. And this is one of the first governments in decades that has actually been committed to rapprochement and peace on the peninsula.
Indeed, we had an amazing candlelight protest, as you recall, for almost a year, almost every Saturday, there was hundreds of thousands of Korean people who tried to, contest the corrupt and very ultra-right-wing Park Geun-hye government, and that required almost 1 out of 4 Koreans participated in the candlelight revolution.
So, just on the facts alone of all of the things that led to this point, a year of revolution, a year of protest, of almost a quarter of Korean citizens, South Korean citizens, participating, demanding that the ruling right-wing government be held accountable, a subsequent impeachment, followed by the election of a more liberal President Moon Jae-in, and then obviously the moves made by the North, their willingness to do the symbolic gesture that Donald Trump and Mike Pence protested against with the unified Korean team at the Olympic Games. I mean, all of these things were critical steps to leading to where we are now, and to reduce it down to being something that any American president did, whether it's Barack Obama, whoever. This had nothing to do with the American president except for the way in which the American president can screw it up. And if Donald Trump gets credit for anything, it's being willing to turn on a dime and no longer go with the bellicose approach to North Korea, and to see the opportunity for him to have a moment of greatness in history and not screw it up. So we will give him credit for not being willing to screw it up, because he most certainly can. He absolutely can. He has the ability to ruin this. And it will require the president of the United States to be willing to work with this possibility. And this is what Donald Trump tweeted out yesterday at the news of North Korea ending their nuclear program. He said North Korea has agreed to suspend all nuclear tests and close up a major test site. This is very good news for North Korea and the world. Big progress. Look forward to our summit. That's where he gets credit. He gets credit for not messing this up so far. But to give him credit for actually leading to peace is problematic, both factually, it's just on the pure facts of everything that led to this, as well as problematic in terms of theory. And because that's what matters to me, is like, what do we make a model out of? Because how we handle this situation, and how this situation resolves itself, will become something that people study in the future in order to resolve future issues. It's just that's just what we do. That's what policymakers do. They study something that was in the past, and they make decisions based on that for the future. And if you as a leftist are saying that the president of the United States is responsible for this peace, then you are saying that his bellicose language, his brinksmanship, his willingness to take us to the brink of nuclear war with North Korea, his draconian, if you're going to give him credit for it, then you got to give all the previous presidents credit for their draconian sanctions that led to the deaths of countless North Koreans. Because those are the actual tangible things that Donald Trump and the American government has done. We've exacerbated the situation. And so to give Donald Trump credit for that is to credit a style of international theory that is worse than Henry Kissinger's realism. Donald Trump's approach to international relations, particularly with North Korea, has been a chaos theory. I mean, it has literally been whatever the hell he wants to say in that moment, which is created chaos, and almost pushed us to the brink. And so if you're honoring and think that Donald Trump should be credited with this, realize that as a leftist, you are co-signing on sanctions, draconian sanctions. You're co-signing on brinksmanship. You're co-signing on bellicose language that could get us into war. You're co-signing on realpolitik that is actually worse. I'm sorry, it's worse than realpolitik. It is chaos theory. And as a leftist, someone who is anti-war or someone who is ostensibly a pacifist, that's the very last thing that you should be crediting for this, because this is quite literally a worse version of Henry Kissinger's foreign policy, with the exception of Henry Kissinger actually had time to carry his out. Donald Trump hasn't been in office long enough to actually see one of his threats through to fruition, thankfully. So just, think these things through. And, before we celebrate Donald Trump, because factually it's wrong. And this is not about trying to withhold credit from a right-wing president. It's simply a matter of fact, both in terms of the historical steps that led to this, as well as theoretical analysis of this. As well as a theoretical analysis of this. We cannot co-sign on you're basically saying we are okay with how America does foreign policy. If you are saying that you think Donald Trump should get credit for this, then you're saying that you are okay with how America does foreign policy. And that seems to be quite antithetical to being a leftist. Last but not least, I think maybe it's not even that deep. One of my followers on Twitter said something, they summarized it quite beautifully. And it's not just the individual link that I referenced in the Facebook post that I tweet. There are more people who are actually saying these things. There are people on Twitter who are talking about how Donald Trump gets the Nobel Prize and then he may end up being impeached and there's a lot of conversations about Donald Trump getting credit for this. But this is from @Dispatchula on Twitter. And he said this, quote, "If I had to guess, I'd say crediting Trump for this apparent thaw serves the purpose of, quote, seeming like a reasonable leftist willing to give credit where credit is due. Accurate or not, it's probably supposed to make them seem like the adult wing of the ideology. It's performative." In other words, leftists who are trying to give this credit to Donald Trump despite the historical steps that actually led to this peace, leftists who are willing to turn a blind eye to the brutish nature of Donald Trump's foreign policy and the American government's foreign policy in order to give Donald Trump credit for something that he deserves no credit for, except for the exception of him not messing it up at this point. It's quite performative, trying to look at people and say, "Hey, I'm the reasonable leftist. See, I can pat Trump on the back for something." And then the question is, who are you trying to be reasonable for? Who are you performing for? Why would you be performing for people who are really concerned about you giving Trump credit? In other words, why are you pacifying? Why are you coddling right wingers? Why are you coddling Trump supporters? When did that become the upper echelon of reasonableness? And how absurd is that in the first place? And why are you even, really? If the goal is to see how many friends we can make with the furthest right in the United States of America, then give me that L off your chest. You're not a leftist. I bet you thought the show was over. Nope. We're just getting started. So many more stories to go before we're done. But I wanted to take a moment to thank all of our newest patrons. It's been a while since I had new patrons to say thank you to. So this is a great pause, right? Thanks to Grace L, Todd B, and Johnathan C. Thank you three for becoming patrons. I haven't really pushed it that much. I've been in and out of town. But we're still raising money to pay for the new facilities where we are going to be creating video. We are setting it up. We've been taking our time trying to get something that looks nice so that we can bring video back to you, and we still need to hit our goal. So go to patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron today. We can hit that goal. You've been enjoying this product. Many of you have been enjoying this product for free. You should join in with everyone else who has been supporting it, some supporting it since day one. Thanks so much to all of our newest patrons. We can't do it without you. Also, I am working on something pretty big, and because of that, I'm going to have to step away from the show for the rest of the week. I may be back on Wednesday, but tomorrow, Anoa Changa is going to fill in. Be sure to be here to support my sister. She does great work. I'm also you're going to hear also from Rebecca Azor, my other sister from another mister. And then on Friday, you'll be hearing from Professor Matt Sinkowitz and Max Inhofe. They will be covering the big three will be covering for me this week while I take some time to put together something that is huge. That's all I can say, but I will not leave you without good content, and I trust each and every one of those people that I just listed to bring you some good content. So with that, I still have 2 more stories to go. I think I'm just getting it all out today because I know I won't be here this week, right, for the rest of the week. All right, here we go. So on Saturday, I was in Newnan, Georgia, and I covered the neo-Nazi event. And this is a small clip of my coverage.
So we made it past the checkpoint. We're going up to the main stage. About a multicultural society and the sort of things that it opens up. Look at South Africa, the modern South Africa today, and how just recently, if you think for 1 minute that a multicultural, multiracial society, communist leaning like what they have in South Africa is the way to go, they will butcher you based on the color of your skin. And those days are coming. Many of these non-whites view us with the real hate and contempt. A lot of the blacks blame us for slavery, and they say the white man owes them something. No one up here ever owned a slave in their life. Our grandparents, our parents did not own slaves, but yet they consistently scream for reparations or for white blood. You think for 1 second, when they get the upper hand, that they are not going to take it out on the white race, like that poor farmer in the video in South Africa that was stripped in the street and beaten to death with stones? If you don't think that's what's coming to America, you're blind, you're deaf, you're dumb and stupid.
You could hear the audience booing the activists and the protesters who were about 50 yards away. You could hear them booing in the background. I wanted to play that because I wanted you to feel what I felt getting access that other people didn't get because of a little measly press credential, which isn't hard to come by even if you're not really press. But I got closer to them. I got face to face with them, and as I recorded for the first few minutes, I was like, I can't do this. This is too much. In fact, I actually said as much as I was recording. Listen.
Very little time left, white man and women. And your options are right up here today. Yo, you can see our banner.
The activist in me is about to cut the fucking fool.
You can email us. You can call us.
I'm trying to keep it press like.
Today.
I'm going to stop the stream while I get my bearings and decide if I'm doing press today or activism today. I'll be back. I didn't start my stream again because I had to find, I just couldn't do it. I did not have the opportunity to challenge what they were saying, so I could not continue to stream what they were saying. Even as in the capacity of trying to, I tried to switch on and off. What am I doing? Am I a commentator today? Am I a journalist today? Am I an activist today? And it becomes difficult in this kind of situation because I got further access than anybody else got. There was about maybe 10 of us from the press who got front and center, face to face with these Nazis. Everyone else was 50 yards away, separated by barricades and an entire line of maybe 200 police officers in riot gear. So in me, I felt the responsibility of the activist in me standing up saying, hey, Ben, put down the camera and jump on stage or put down the camera and do something, or at a minimum, don't amplify their message if you don't get a chance to challenge them. I honestly looked, I surveyed, I'm going to be honest with you, I surveyed the whole stage. I'm like, you know what? If I jump on stage, I didn't really care about the many boots that I was going to get. I honestly thought about, like, what charge am I going to get? Probably like disturbing the peace or disorderly, something. I think I heard someone say trespassing. I was really considering the charge, and, I got kids at home. But then I was like, okay, so pull the plug. Let's find the power supply and pull the plug. So when I found the power supply, I literally was reaching. I promise you, it's funny how this works. As I was reaching to pull the power supply, their time ran out. They started late. And so their entire presentation was cut short. And as much as there is to hate about what the police did to the counter protesters this weekend, the police chief of the city, the second the power was shut off on them, he got his bullhorn and said, "You need to leave this park." And he demanded that they leave the park. And if they didn't leave in so many seconds, then they would be arrested for trespassing. And so they got out of there. But the point is this, it just made me realize I love feeling sick to my stomach. Because for the few, I think for maybe 7 minutes, I streamed their messages, and that's all they want. They want their message spread, because their message, what you hear there, is actually seductive to some people. To some people, it makes sense, and they know that if their message can just be heard by one person, then they have the potential of spreading their message even further. And that's what they wanted. And that's why I cut my stream off, because I'm like, if I'm not going to get a chance to respond, you won't get a chance to my platform. But that was just me. There was, like I said, there was about 10 of us. So the other 9 people minus 1, there was one guy, I have to give him props. When he got in a face-to-face interview with one of these Nazis, he went toe-to-toe and challenged him as a reporter. But everyone else just shoved microphones in these guys' faces, cameras in their faces, and just took their word for it unchallenged. By the time I saw that going on, I was so disillusioned, because what are we doing? It wasn't Antifa that drew attention to this. It wasn't Antifa, rather, that was amplifying the message. Sure, you had 1,000 counter protesters, and everybody expected something along the lines of Charlottesville, so everyone was there with the cameras and ready. But it wasn't Antifa that elevated the voices of Nazis. It was us, we, the press, the media. We did that, and we have the ability to say no. Yes, they have the right to free speech in the United States of America. I would add they also have a right to be punched, but they do not have the right to your platform. They do not have the right to being on your news station. That's an editorial decision. And that's why I decided to cut my stream off, because I was not going to allow my channels to be used for this any more than they already were. So I came home and I was really, really, really distraught. I can't really tell you how I began to understand so clearly why Antifa does what it does. Because when you're in the presence of that type of hatred, when you're in the presence of people who literally would kill an entire group of people and celebrate that, there is no shoving a microphone in their mouth to give them something to say, to let their voice be heard. There's only to smash Nazis. That's the only thing good to do with Nazis. And these are literal Nazis. I put a link in the description from Jack Smith IV, from Mike.com. He got pictures of the swastika burning that they did about 25, 50 miles away from the location in Newnan, Georgia. They were out there as literal Nazis. And we in the media just gave them access to our platforms unchallenged, save one person, and me, who I eventually cut it off, because I honestly cut off the stream because I had to figure out what I was going to do. I felt like I had a responsibility. I felt like if I had given my press pass to someone from Antifa and they got back there, they would have smashed the entire stage. And granted, don't get me wrong, I know that doesn't do anything in the bigger scheme of things, but you know what it does? It makes you as an individual who's standing in the presence of pure evil feel like you did something when you saw evil, versus just cutting on your camera and letting your audience hear what they had to say in the name of journalism. And I'm not done with these Nazis yet. The police were on hand, and they really pilloried counter-protesters, particularly counter-protesters who were wearing masks. It seemed that they were more concerned with those that were wearing masks than the people advocating for violence on stage. But listen to this quick clip of the police interaction with counter-protesters and some members of Democratic Socialists of America.
State law requires you to remove your masks right now. You will do it right now, or you will be arrested. This is your last warning. You can gather, and you will be arrested. And you will be arrested. You will be arrested. You must take your mask off right now. This is your last warning.
So, and that what followed was a really brutal crackdown. I mean, there were Humvees in the streets, or SWAT vehicles in the streets. I mean, at least 400 police officers and SWAT team members, snipers, sheriff's officers. They even brought in people from the Department of Corrections in, full, stormtrooper gear. It was, and this was on the opposite side of the Nazis. See, here's the thing, right? Okay, speech is protected in the United States. I get it. But violent speech is America is more afraid of people who would fight against violence than they are people who would do violence in the long run. Like, I mean, let me say that again. So what? Antifa is going to punch a few Nazis in the face. Okay. I'm all for it. It's like a palate cleansing kind of thing. It cleanses your soul. I can tell you that firsthand, because if you're ever in the presence of Nazis and they're speaking around you and they're spewing their hate and you don't do anything about it, then you're going to feel like I felt when I left. So what? A few members of Antifa punches a few Nazis. When Nazis are planning the extermination of an entire group of people. See, it's that short-term violence, that short-term punch that might knock some sense into someone that the police were cracking down on, but protecting the people who were planning long-term exterminations. And spreading hate. Let's say they don't get to their ultimate goal of eradicating Jews from the face of the planet. Let's say they don't get to that. But they absolutely lead to incidents like we saw in Charlottesville, with the death of Heather Heyer, in North Carolina, Mother Emanuel AME, with the deaths, with the execution of 9 churchgoers by Dylan Roof, like we just saw in Tennessee, where this shooter went in with an assault rifle and shot 4 and killed 4 people. So if they don't achieve their ultimate goal of the extermination of Jews and non-whites, then they do lead to other acts of violence that are far greater than that punch that Antifa landed in their face. They arrested some members of Democratic Socialists of America. One, someone I know, Daniel. He's since been released, but I put a link in the description because shout out to Democratic Socialists of America, man. You guys were there. You all were there. You all represented. You were arrested. And I have a link in the description where you can contribute to their bail fund to help them get out. There's still another guy who is still locked up. He has some more serious charges. But I love I'm starting to love DSA. You know why? Because when they see a Nazi like Milo Yiannopoulos in New York City, this is what they do.
Nazi scum, get out! 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 Nazi scum, get out!
Bye! Bye! Hey, hey, go home.
Now, notwithstanding how off key that guy was at the end, singing na 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 na, hey, 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 go home. That was amazing. Simple, but amazing. No, there is no quarter for fascists. There is no room for someone as hateful as Milo Yiannopoulos. Not in our presence. No, when they're in your presence, you get them out of your presence. Sure, somebody else can tolerate them. Someone else can let them come in their establishment and spread their hate in a very charismatic way that someone who isn't paying attention to the contradictions in the words that they're speaking could be convinced and converted into a white supremacist. Sure, if you want to allow that to happen, that's fine. Let them come and speak on your campus so that they can confuse some of your students and turn them into Dylan Roofs, the future Dylan Roofs. Or at a minimum, turn them into someone like Tucker Carlson, whose language is exactly the same as those fascists who were on stage on Saturday, except it's nice and clean and without profanity and without the pure call for violence. But the speaking against multiculturalism, the language is exactly the same. So either they become an outright fascist Nazi or they become like Tucker Carlson. If that's what you want, if you want them in your presence so that they can convince your children and your friends and people around you of that, then by all means, that's fine. But if you're like Democratic Socialists of America, you chase them the hell away. If you're like Antifa, when you see a Nazi, you punch a Nazi. And if you're concerned with the idea of us who are intolerant to intolerance becoming ourselves intolerant, if that paradox still confuses you, listen to Karl Popper. Listen to this by Karl Popper as he explains why we who are intolerant do not, and by necessity must not, tolerate intolerance. He said this, quote, "Unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and the tolerance will be destroyed with them. In this formulation, I do not imply, for instance, that we should always suppress the utterance of intolerant philosophies, as long as we can counter them by rational argument and keep them in check by public opinion. Suppression would certainly be unwise. But we should claim the right to suppress them if necessary, even by force, for it may easily turn out that they are not prepared to meet us on the level of rational argument, but begin by denouncing all argument. They may forbid their followers to listen to rational argument because it is deceptive, and teach them to answer arguments by the use of their fists or pistols. We should therefore claim in the name of tolerance the right not to tolerate the intolerant." Karl Popper in 1945 in The Open Society and Its Enemies. One last story. You get a full hour today, but I couldn't let today go by without talking about Kanye West and Candace Owens. Kanye West tweeted out over the weekend, "I like the way that Candace Owen thinks." If you don't know who Candace Owen is, I envy you. But she is a black woman who took the red pill. She used to be a liberal. In fact, she was so liberal that she wanted to create a website that would essentially dox people who were hostile online, dox trolls. And she's got a reputation in the like the 4chan community and the deep on the YouTube community. She has a reputation of being phony, not really being a conservative. But like I've always joked about, if I were to convert and become a conservative, man, I could be rich in no time. I could pay all of my kids' bills for, their kids' bills. because there's nothing more valuable to conservative white America than having a black person who would either say some racist stuff that they can't get away with, or B, confirm all of their racist, their soft dog whistle racism, and in a way that Candace Owens perfectly embodies. She absolutely loves the opportunity to make money off of peddling ideas that are right in lockstep with the alt-right, right in lockstep with Donald Trump, and perfectly in lockstep with the conservative movement in general. If you are a black person willing to do that, then you can get paid. I don't really care that Kanye West likes what she has to say, because I only really like Kanye West when he's rapping. I mean, other than that, he did have that one moment when he said George Bush doesn't care about black people. I mean, that was a moment of enlightenment, but he's been going through. I'm not going to blame this on the Kardashians by any means, even though they do seem to be very in close proximity with the fall of quite a few people. But I'm not going to blame them. I'll blame it more on the fact that he has become extremely unstable since the death of his mother. He has really lost a lot of his faculties since that point, and it was a traumatic event that he probably had no one that he could honestly work that through with. And even then, I can't blame it on that, because he's always been a jackass. I mean, just plain and simple. So these are probably things he believed even when his mother was alive. So let's play the clip. I'm going to play the clip that Kanye West was supposedly responding to when he said he likes the way that she thinks. Here is Candace Owen. Red Pill Black is her name on YouTube. Take a listen in.
What you're seeing happening today, obviously we have some black people that are just shouting in the back. We have some black people that are sitting in the front quietly, that are chanting USA and having a normal conversation. I love that, because what I say every single time, and you may have seen me on the news, is that what is happening right now in the black community, you're going to hear it in this room first. There is an ideological civil war happening. Black people that are focused on their past and shouting about slavery, and black people that are focused on their futures, okay? That's really what it comes down to, okay? I can guarantee you what you're seeing happening is victim mentality versus victor mentality. And
That's
I promise
great, by
you,
the way.
the people here are going to win.
I love that.
And there's no doubt in my mind. I can tell you right now who is going to be better off when we look 20 years, when we look at the faces in this room. Who is going to be better off are the girls that are sitting right here and across this room, because they don't have your mentality. Victim mentality is not cool. I don't know why people like being oppressed. It's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. I love oppression. We're oppressed. 400 years of slavery, Jim Crow, which, by the way, none of you guys lived through. Your grandparents did, and it's embarrassing that you utilize their history. You utilize their history, and you come in here with more emotion than they ever had when they were living through it. More emotion than they ever had when they were living through it. It's embarrassing. You're not living through anything right now. You're overly privileged Americans.
I don't wish harm on anyone, but if Candace doesn't have any children and she eventually has a son, I wonder what the hell she's going to say to him when he gets harassed by the police, because he's going to get harassed by the police just like the rest of us did. But she's probably going to say, "Oh, you're not going through anything, Jimmy," because she's going to call him some junk like that. You're not going through anything, Bob. Really? Never mind the fact that we just had that video out of Starbucks where the two guys were sitting down for 2 minutes, clocked the time, 2 minutes, and the police were called on them within 2 minutes. Never mind the fact of all the black people who are being murdered by white supremacists in this country. And she has the nerve to say that we're not going through anything, and that we have more emotions now than the people who went through Jim Crow and slavery. Do you know why they couldn't show emotions during Jim Crow and slavery? They couldn't show their anger because it would get them killed. Try being angry at your slave master. You'll be whipped to within an inch of your life. Try showing some anger during Jim Crow. You would be lynched before the sun went down. And she says that there's nothing. Who actually, I love the straw man, right? The straw man of, why do people like being oppressed? Saying, "Oh, I like to be oppressed." Who the hell says they like to be oppressed, Candace? Or did you just need a good, quick talking point? And then, of course, she's performing for her boss. I want to call him her master, but I won't say that. But she's performing for her boss, Charlie Kirk, who's the president and founder of Turning Point USA, which is a pro-capitalism, pro-free market educational organization, nonprofit. Ironically, pro-capitalism nonprofit. But I digress. She's performing and he's the one in the background. Oh, I love that. Oh, that sounds great. Say that again. Right? Because they absolutely need white people. I mean, they need black people who will fill in the gap and cover them so that they can get away with all the racist things that they want to do. Or even if they don't want to carry out and act out on their racism, they don't want this system to change one bit, because they can never lend any credence to the reality that this system is designed to benefit them, white men, white Christian men. The entire power structure of this nation was built around and to support white Christian men. And if they ever have to be held accountable for the benefits that they derive from this society, because this society was designed, built on the backs of black people, built by black people, but designed to service white Christian men, if they ever have to be held accountable for that, then their mediocrity would really be exposed. The fact that they don't deserve what they have, they were just born into that privilege. And so how do they get away with that? Well, you hire whatever black person is hungry enough to actually go out there and give those talking points. But when reality hits her, when Candace is somewhere and a police officer doesn't recognize her, or some old angry white lady at a restaurant doesn't recognize her and starts punching her like the white woman who was punching a black troop, then what is she going to say? Was she going to take the blue pill at that point and come back to her senses? Or will she just be whisked away into the comfortable, lavish lifestyle that is afforded to black people who are willing to sell their blackness and to sell their soul for about 15 minutes of fame and conservatism? That's all the time I have for you today. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. It's always a pleasure to spend this time with you. Be sure to go to patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron. Help support what we're doing in the studio as we build it out. We can't do it without you. Thanks to our newest patrons today. This week, Anoa Changa, Rebecca Azor, and Professor Matt Sinkowitz, they will be covering for me while I take on a project that is really worth our time. It's really worth me taking this week to hash it out. So thanks so much. I will see you when I get back. Take care.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.